This is the Open University.
Hi there, welcome back. It's been a while, and I wanted to tell you about a couple of things which have changed in the last month or so. First of all, the vinyl album which we've been trailing for Actor, the current Momus album, looks like it's going to be economically unviable and also technically unviable because it's 52 minutes and 45 seconds long now, the album. I added a song which is called Hot Head. Pushing it over the acceptable length that a vinyl LP can be without losing sound quality. So I've actually decided just to release it as a CD as usual. The usual Momus CD with a digipack gatefold. These records don't sell very much, you know. Luckily, thanks to those of you who have become my patrons and who are using Bandcamp, that's all going very well, the online non-material aspect of things. Thank you so much. This is making everything work for me. The CD's become a kind of afterthought and a kind of hard copy, really, for those of you who collect CDs. Some people were welcoming the vinyl experiment, the idea of having a nice 12-inch format. I must say, when I go into record shops here in Paris, I love flipping through vinyl and looking at the sleeves and everything. I would never flip through CDs. But then, do I buy vinyl? No, I don't. I just go into this area, the 12th arrondissement of Paris, heading up into the 11th, is full. It's chock-a-block with record shops. It always used to be. When I lived in Paris in the 90s, it was always the place to come for specialized vinyl. And it still is. There, you know, within 5 minutes of my door, there's one record shop, and probably I could take you to a dozen, you know, record shops, little independent record shops with funky records in the window, and you know that it's fun to, like Hark, for instance, is a very good one, not far from here, between here and Père Lachaise. I always love going in there. It's very curated and very boutique-like and independent. It would have been nice to see Actor in there with the big artwork and everything, but it's not going to happen. It costs, you know, $4,000 or something to master a vinyl record, and it takes a long time as well, and also I don't know, probably the costs would mount up by the time it was exported to the various places you live in. So it looks like it's going to be a CD. A good CD though, because now it's got this slightly more up-tempo track, Hot Head, on it. I feel like it's more the kind of record I wanted it to be. It's got some melancholy and you know, introspective songs, but it's also got some angry activist songs. The Hot Head lyric says, "I'm not the kind of guy to let things happen to me, to lie back and let things happen to me." So it's slightly more activist for the Actor theme. You know, Actor was originally going to be called Activist, to balance out the Quietist or Quietism album. The other exciting event, or one of the other, well, that's sort of maybe disappointing event for some of you, that there'll be no vinyl, but the other exciting event in the Momus world is that I took a trip last weekend to Gelsenkirchen to see a Cyber-operetta, as it's been called. It's directed by Nora Kral in the Musiktheater am Revier, it's called, which is a big subsidized theatre in the middle of this Gelsenkirchen, which is the poorest town in Germany, actually. Rather depressed. Used to be a mining town in the 70s, well, up until about the 70s, and then, as elsewhere, the mining industry was decimated or went abroad anyway. So I think the per capita income is the lowest in Germany in that town, and it makes a real contrast if you come, as we did. We being me and Robert Dye, who's a great patron and friend, has been very supportive for decades actually. He chose to accompany me, partly by car. So we met in Brussels, we stayed overnight in Brussels, we drove up to Eindhoven in Holland, and then we took trains across to Gelsenkirchen to see this operetta on the Sunday night. And it was probably a mistake taking the trains, because German trains are consistently late. I mean, I have to say they're consistently inconsistent. Well, the ones that are late are the ones that you need to be on time, and then the ones that you need to be late because you're running late are always on time. So you always miss. If you have a correspondence time of 10 minutes or less, you've got no chance really of catching a German train. They're consistently late, except that they're not always consistent. So we missed a lot of trains and had to dawdle in tiny towns on benches waiting for the next train. But it was fun. I managed to see my Brussels friend Lucien Moriyama, who's an artist and has bought a steel pedal guitar. Two of them actually. He built one himself, and he also built some bagpipes which he got me playing, made of plastic bags. My other friend is Dan Barbanel, who's Mr. Diagonal. He used to be in a band called the Black Light Orchestra, and fantastic songwriter, very obscure, even more obscure than I am, which is saying something. And so more collaborations, are always being mooted when I meet with Dan. His latest idea was to take the David Bowie unfinished musical, which was called The Spectator. Apparently Bowie, in the Isolar offices in New York, had a locked room which only he and his assistant Coco Schwab had the key to, and in there he was working on this musical called The Spectator, which was set in the 18th century. I could imagine it would have a Peaky Blinders kind of atmosphere, but be set. So he was researching it, be set in the 18th century in London. Dan said, why don't we do that? I think it sounds a bit like the Threepenny Opera to me, actually. But maybe what Brecht did with the Threepenny Opera is what Bowie was planning to do with The Spectator. Addison and Lamb were great essayists. I don't know if he was reading Addison and Lamb. The Spectator, the right-wing rag that it's turned into today, it's not... it didn't start out like that, although I think it probably did have a conservative worldview back then. The other idea that we trailed years ago actually was to do a musical based on McGonagall's poems, the famously bad Scottish poet who wrote the Tay Bridge disaster, a sort of lament in rhyming couplets, terrible rhyming couplets actually, for the victims of this railway disaster in Scotland in the end of the 19th century, unless I'm wrong. He was unintentionally comic, a serious writer with serious topics who seemed to write light verse and to be a bit of a comedian. And we thought that would be a good topic for a musical as well. I don't know, I'm a huge fan of Sondheim and all the rest of it, but what I tend to do though is to take the influence of other art forms into pop music. So you'll hear a cabaret tinge in my pop music, but you won't necessarily see me in cabaret. But this is where we come to the actual performance, the Cyber-operetta, which is based on Jacques Offenbach's Orpheus in the Underworld in Gelsenkirchen, because it was a bit like seeing a Weimar cabaret. Or it might have been, as someone commented when I mentioned visiting it, somebody said, this must have felt like David Bowie seeing this stage musical Lazarus just before he died. Touch wood, I hope I'm not about to croak. Because in a way, Bowie had this lifelong ambition to see a musical based on his songs. And he put one together with a certain urgency when he knew he didn't have much time to live. I was just contacted earlier this year by these people saying, we want to use 3 of your songs in an operetta in Germany, and can we have permission and pay you some money? So I very happily consented, and they said it's I Want You But I Don't Need You from 1997, which is one of my biggest songs. It's really one of my hits. And it's Slippery Life, which is very obscure, a very deep cut indeed, which was a Sun Butler track I did with Joe Howe. So obscure that even Joe Howe doesn't remember making it.
It's a slippery
It was based on some of his backings and things, but obviously it was my song kind of superimposed. And it wasn't included on the Sun Butler album for some reason. But it's a song about Sherlock Holmes, so I don't know how it was going to fit into the plot of Orpheus and the Underworld. They have adapted the plot, though, I have to say. It's a cyber operetta about AI. So really comes across as is a pantomime. I was saying this to the director Nora Crowell when we met after the production. Actually, it reminded me of a British pantomime, because at Christmas time you get this classic themes like Dick Whittington and his cat or whatever, but then you'll get a lot of topical themes kind of superimposed in the plot, and then you'll get pop songs as well. So it's a very impure but entertaining art form, the pantomime. Happens only in the run-up to Christmas in Britain. Nora Crowell had never heard of pantomime in that sense, and actually her campy Cyber-operetta, featuring a lot of elderly actresses in kind of kitschy wigs and leopard skin coats and things like that. And this evil character who is called Arex Tamp, I guess a little bit based on Elon Musk or somebody like that. It was a sort of evil character who's trying to turn three goddesses, Aphrodite, Athena and Hera, into AI forms, kind of robotic AI platforms. So this was really like a Weimar, kind of Brecht and Weil cabaret, and hearing my songs, and the third song I forgot to mention, it's Men Are the Problem, which is nice because that's a relatively recent song from just 2 years ago. And it fitted the feminist theme really, because it was rewritten, Orpheus and the Underworld, kind of rewritten as centering around these three goddesses and attempts to limit and turn into AI these three goddesses. So it pleased me to see some new material in there, because if I get any public exposure at all, it tends to be from my really old work up until the 20th century work, I have to say, in general. I Want You But I Don't Need You is from 1997, but for instance on Sunday, Stuart Maconie, who's been a staunch supporter for decades, played Don't Stop the Night from the Don't Stop the Night album, which goes back to my very first EP, because it's a rewrite of Ballad of the Barrel Organist from the very first EP, Beast with Three Backs, in 1985. So I tend to be frozen for some people, in British journalists especially, in that 80s moment, which is okay. I'm into 80s music just like anyone else. And there's a lot of references in the Actor album to Matt Johnson and, flanged synthesizer guitar lines and all sorts of references back to the 80s. But, you could go further back and say I'm a cabaret artist, and, the 11 Executioners on the very first Momus stuff is EP is a tribute to a radical political satirical cabaret in Munich in the early years of the 20th century. So it was a little taste seeing these songs on stage with a 5-piece band. So it had 3 string players, an accordionist who also played a little toy piano to get the synth lines on Men Are the Problem, ding, 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 and a pianist. So a little 5-piece pit orchestra really, although they were on the stage with the actors. That was really a cabaret experience for me, and it reminded me that my songs are satirical. Men Are the Problem is about toxic masculinity, obviously. My German is not great, so I wasn't entirely clear about how my songs, because it's just Offenbach's music and then Momus. There's nothing in between. No other cultural references from the present except the plot about AI. And then my songs. I'm not entirely sure whether it was very successful, but what I will say is that the audience loved it. Standing ovation at the end that went on for 10 minutes or something. And there's only one performance left, which I think is on October the 10th. Potentially it could be revived next year. It's in repertory. They have a company that just sits there, and same musicians work in all the productions. An old-fashioned band of married men, as Bowie sings in one of his songs, doing my songs, and it did give me a little glimpse of what I could do if I had the money, if I had the resources to play with real live musicians in a real live context. I could do a much more theatrical presentation, and maybe it would be that McGonagall thing, who knows. But what always puts me off is just the logistics of making a production like that. You have to find money men, find theatres willing to put it on. We don't live in a world where it's easy for people like me to raise money, and we have to do everything on the cheap. So my way of doing things on the cheap is just sticking out the same CDs every year or twice a year now. I have to do it twice as quickly, A, because I'm aging, and B, because an individual release doesn't make that much money. And also C, because, you know, back in the 60s and 70s, people had that work rate. It's not that hard, you know, really, if you're inspired to put out 2 albums a year. So the other thing is that the Versions project continues. Versions is my cover versions project, and people can pay $100 to get a cover version. So the latest cover version is from the musical Cabaret, which is unfortunately rather topical. I Don't Care Much is the name of the song. I don't care much, go or stay. I don't care very much either way. Words sound false when your coat's too thin. Feet don't waltz when the roof caves in. And if you're wondering, what is that song? Because I saw the movie of Cabaret and I don't remember that song. It's because it's not in the movie. And there's a reason, which is that when Bob Fosse was making the film, he wanted all the songs to appear as if they were real music in a real context, which the actors or the characters in the film are witnessing. So it's Sally Bowles singing in the Cabaret, or it's other, you know, the MC singing in the Cabaret context. Lawrence Ferber, who commissioned the song, found an AI explanation that, okay, this is my understanding of it, I might be wrong, but diegetic, and this goes back to Aristotle, but diegesis is basically, God, I've forgotten. It's when you have action, okay, there's mimesis, which is action which reproduces real life, and then there's the epic, epos, the Greek word, but epic, which is more like poetry with a narrator. There's a poet, or a narrator there telling you a story, and that's not seen as artificial in that context. So there's a fourth wall kind of thing, the situation that you see that somebody's telling you a story. There might be illustrations within that story with actors and situations, but you always go back to the narrator, and that narrator might be omniscient. So as far as I understand it, diegetic music is music which appears as an experience that the actors can hear. The actors can hear it, and they're there in role. It's not stopping the story to present a little song, you know, as a musical can do. So a musical is more like on the epos side, the epic theatre side. A musical proclaims its artificiality. It's not claiming to be a slice of life or selected, edited highlights from a story, except insofar as bits of a story can be fitted into it. So Brecht, when you talk about epic theatre of Brecht was very keen that the actors should make it clear to the audience at all times that they're actors. Each one is kind of narrating the story of his own character, so they can step outside the character and say, I'm an actor, it's very clear that I'm an actor. The actor becomes a kind of poetic narrator of his own actions as he's doing them. And this was Brecht's idea to make epic theatre, was to make the audience more critical and more detached, not emotionally manipulated by the action, but able to sit back and think critically about what was going on stage. So I've always been a bit sort of anxious about the music which is trying to tell you how to feel about a scene, music which the characters can't hear. It's directly targeted at your emotions. It's not that I'm against emotional music. I mean, a couple of people said that this I Don't Care Much song made them cry, and that's fine. That's the ultimate compliment, that you can really tap into people's emotions. I think that's because in this context, Cabaret as a Weimar Republic time capsule is very relevant because we're kind of in a second Weimar now. We have been, you know, I made a song called Neo Weimar back in 2016.
I am a camera in Neo Weimar, panning the faces in collapsing worlds.
We've been in this Neo-Weimar situation. Arguably, it's now post-1933 in terms of that parallel. We have actual fascist clampdowns in the US, particularly. Britain, of course, poodling along behind the US, with Farage probably scheduled to be the next leader, and to start dismantling British democracy in the same way that Trump is dismantling American democracy. Current news today, you know, universities are going to have to sign up to some kind of pledge not to do any diversity policies and not to insult the regime in any way. The army is possibly going to be forced to pledge loyalty to the imperial president, etc., etc. You know, just the Constitution being undermined every single day at every step, in ways that nobody seems able to resist. Who knows? I hope there is some kind of gathering resistance to it. But yes, Cabaret and Satirical Cabaret could not be more topical, really. Yeah, what else has been happening?
Open University.